What happened now is that we entered a safe zone. So this is a zone where you feel sort of safe, and now you're going to be entering a zone where there's not that safe.
Well, I'm really excited about this one. I'm Sid Schumann from PlayStation Blog, and we are here checking out Amnesia Rebirth, and this is the new game from Frictional Games. And in fact, I'm joined by Frederick Olsen and Thomas Grip from Frictional. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I am really excited about this one. I'm a huge fan of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and I really loved Soma. And we are seeing footage here recorded from a PS4 Pro. The game is scheduled to come out October 20th, so not a long wait for us. But when I heard that we were going to check out some new footage of Amnesia Rebirth, I jumped at the chance. And guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. It's going to be exciting to show off some new stuff from the game now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so very little is known about this game, and I got to think that that's purposeful on your part.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are some... It's similar to how we had in Soma a bit, in that in Soma it's very hard to talk about what's interesting about that game because it's such a high level in the narrative, and if you're gonna talk about it, it's gonna be a ton of spoilers to it. So we're trying to keep it mysterious, and we want players to come in not knowing really what to expect here.
Job well done.
Yeah, so far so good.
Well, I see some of the hallmarks of Amnesia, or at least what I think of sort of the Amnesia formula. I see, very limited light, what appears to be a lantern, some matches. Tell me a little bit about the moment-to-moment gameplay that we're seeing here.
Yeah, so what's happening now is that Tasi, who is our main protagonist, she needs to go through a neighborhood that's not the friendliest of places.
Yeah.
And one thing about her is that she has an affliction. We'll see a bit more about that, where she needs to manage her fear. If her fear becomes too high, things are not going to go well for her. And she, gets frightened by being in the dark, seeing spooky things, and so on and so forth. So a big part of the gameplay they're going to be saying here is just keeping your environment lit up. And for that, you have a limited amount of matches, you have a trusty lantern, but all of these are fairly scarce resources. So you have to try hard, and you have to think about how you manage them. And a new thing that you saw just before was how you use the matches in this game. So you can use them as a very temporary light source, or you can light up different things. And now we're going to enter an environment here where she needs to be careful about how she goes forward.
Now, we've seen games that have, you mentioned sort of managing, stress or sanity here, and we've seen, we've seen this in games before. What are the sort of downsides of not managing that well?
Well, what's going to happen, we're going to see this possibly a bit later in, is that, as I said, she has this affliction, and as the fear goes up, her illness is going to start spreading.
I see.
And that actually has some higher level consequences for the player on a narrative level. And so you have to be very careful. In Amnesia, it was more like an ambient feature, but here you have things that you care about in the game are like... what do you say, Frederick? What's going to happen if the fear goes too high? And
so it ties into the high-level story of the game, of course. If you don't manage if you don't manage your fear, basically, you risk putting someone you care about in danger, I'd say. So that's the kind of approach we're taking, and we spent actually quite a lot of time in development trying just to nail this part of it, make it feel like you don't really want to fail in this game because it might have some horrible consequences in the end.
Yeah, so we're going for like what this ties into is this sort of higher level thing, and what you're seeing here is more like a lower level. You have to, here. Oh, yeah, that's a new thing, by the way, on monsters, is that they have a smell system right now. So
Interesting.
you have to be careful about where you are at, and they're going to be smelling places you've recently been at, and so on. So there's some strategy in managing that, and obviously there's sounds and so on and so forth. And here we're seeing like a very typical Amnesia gameplay session. This is something we're really focused on, which is that so you want to stay in the dark in order to avoid a monster, but staying in the dark will also increase your fear level, and increasing your fear level is really, really bad for you. So, but also getting caught by a monster is really, really bad for you. So you have to we go on a mad rush, just trying to get past the monsters, and then they might have caught me. But if I stay too long in the dark, that's going to be bad for me as well. So you're constantly fighting these two systems, and that adds a ton of tension to it all, I feel. And then connecting that all to the sort of higher level narrative, where the player actually have very personal things that they are going to be very deeply involved in the game, that are affected by how well they're doing at keeping their fear levels down. We're seeing here these sort of tentacles coming in, and it's not going so well for Tasi right now on her managing her fears here. So there we have to use these sort of matches here, and that's also so. Here's a match, and I could have used that to lit up something later on, but then I would take a hit from the darkness in these tunnels. So you constantly have to stress out and think about when should I be using this and when should I not be using it.
Kind of walking the razor's edge there.
Yeah.
Walking the razor's edge in between, staying relatively safe. You're never that safe in these types of games, but not also having your fear go out of control.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, how did you folks this is a direct sequel to Amnesia: The Dark Descent, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, that's correct.
And what did you learn, coming off of Amnesia: Dark Descent? That was some time ago, and Soma, personal favorite of mine, was a little bit more recently. But how does this sort of represent the culmination of the things that you've learned making those games?
I would say that what we've learned is really that we're combined the two. And I know you're really passionate about this, Fredrik, so I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. No. You mean combining the two, the gameplay?
The gameplay and narrative, and the gameplay from Amnesia and the sort of high-level narrative from Soma.
Basically, there's a lot of things in gameplay from Amnesia that works, and we've just expanded on that, I say. But on top of that, we're gonna, of course, incorporate stuff that into the gameplay that we feel actually fuels the narrative aspect of the game. And it's so difficult to talk about these things without spoiling it.
Yeah, please don't do that.
No, we really want this to be like a personal roller coaster for people when they play it. And by spoiling too much, we feel that we kind of just spoil that moment for people.
Yeah. Something I would point out as we're going forward here as well is that what you saw previously, what happened now is that we entered a safe zone. So that's something that we're adding to this. This is a zone where you feel sort of safe.
Whoa.
And now you're going to be entering a zone where there's not that safe. And in that you got some relief. And also, we're trying to build a lot of variation into the game. So in the previous section was more of a sneaking place of there's one sleeping monster and then another one stalking about. And in this one, there's 20 monsters all sleeping, and you have to be really careful not disturbing them. Lightning, this match here was, should we really be doing that? But, we don't want to let our fear take over us. And you saw there were some flashing images, and that means that, well, we're losing it soon. We're very close to losing it now. So we're all constantly trying to figure out new ways of presenting things, and that's something that we learned a lot from Amnesia and from the encounters in Soma, where like people were, well, this is sort of samey right now and takes away some of the fear. So there's been a lot of work in the game just thinking of how can we do something different, how can we approach this in a way that feels fresh, and so on and so forth. And there's also this constant change between different modes. Now we find here's a note written by someone that you actually meet later on in the game, and reading these notes and encountering the enemies and solving puzzles and so on. You don't want to have like the same thing coming over and over again, but we want to keep the player on their toes and not knowing what they're going to expect next, and constantly have these sort of ups and downs in gameplay. Sometimes it's calm and sometimes it's really intense. This part that we're going through now is almost like 100% intense, and then later other levels are going to be less so, and I think that's needed in order to like keep the horror up. You can only be scared for so long at a time, and you need to like calm down, and then you're ready for another scare.
Then you're ready to get scared again. I mean, I would say Frictional Games is sort of one of the top studios at building this sense of dread and atmospheric horror. It's such a sort of an exquisite, difficult emotion to kind of build up in folks. I mean, what is your philosophy on sort of effective horror?
The most effective horror is, it's the build up to the encounter. Now there's a bunch of encounters here, but we also spend hours upon hours in the game, just drawing out on, seeing glimpses, learning new things, and so on. And that's what we build a lot of this on. Like the typical thing would be reading a little bit about some weird creature, then seeing some signs of that creature, and then hearing some noises of it, and then constantly escalating all the way until an encounter. And I think that's very much a core philosophy. And then also, we're not so much thinking in gameplay, as in what would be interesting to play, but what would be a scary scenario for me to go through. And that's like how we came up with the previous section. What if we just, went through a big room where there's a ton of monsters sleeping, and you don't know when anyone's gonna jump at you, and then we like build a scenario based on that, and so on. So a lot of it is just thinking about that. Now we're also like we're getting even more flashes here. So shit, this is going bad here. If they're not...
Got to get that light going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think also when we look at horror and the way we incorporate it is also a way to kind of strengthen the narrative at the very end. So I mean, with horror and putting like fear into the player, we can actually create a communication channel to them where we can actually bring some other emotions, not only pure fear, into them more easily by making them scared first, by making them sad, or like in Soma, sadness and loneliness and all of those feelings.
Yeah, so yeah, here we're actually, this is an interesting part here, because we're actually had to a new thing to the game where you come into these struggles with yourselves, and the illness is about to take you over, and you have to have these sort of struggles where you have to try and keep yourself together and not get taken over by this illness that's spreading in your body. Also, to just expand upon what Frederick said, is that yes, we're definitely using fear in order to do other things in our games, and I think that's sort of why it's we've become. I think that the sort of success of our games is based around that. Soma is a terrific example where it's walking around in spooky underwater environments, but it's also about what is it to be a human being.
Yep.
And as Frederick said, we're sort of taking a sort of shortcut through the fear into the player's head, getting them immersed in the game, and then through that we can have these sort of deeper themes, and we're doing a different similar thing here but with very different themes.
That's great to hear, because I wouldn't even really describe Soma as a horror game per se, but it's one of the scariest games I've ever played, and it's existential fear. There's some scenes that are a little bit like this with some really creepy just scenarios and enemies you're trying to avoid, but it was the themes, I think, that just kept me sort of morbidly fascinated, and just, it was a different kind of dread. It was a more sort of cosmic level, if I may, of fear, and I'm glad to hear you're still experimenting with that here in this new one.
Yeah, we're doing that, but it's also safe to say that we like to challenge ourselves with new things. So I'd say that this, whereas Soma had a bigger, broader theme, this is a more personal theme in this one. More connected to Tasi and her journey, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, clearly I see some great advances here in the visuals as well. I mean, it's a very polished looking game. It is coming out here October 20th. I just want to plug that one again, but yeah, it looks great. I mean, you folks are at Frictional super well known for just very polished experiences, especially after Soma. So glad to see that tradition is intact. How big is the team at Frictional?
We're like 20 people or so.
Wow.
Depending a bit. So fairly small. We really challenged ourselves just with just having really big interconnected levels and just a variety of different environments. So this environment you're here, this is fairly unique. A lot of it, you're not going to see another environment like it, and then next level is going to be different and so on. So constantly having new things for the player, I think that's really important in a horror game, because horror games are fairly not that it's an unpleasant experience. So you need to have other things that keep the player hooked, and like, oh shit, I'm really hate being scared, but I want to see what's behind the next door.
Well, that's great, and really appreciate you two coming by, giving us a sneak peek here at what we can experience with Amnesia Rebirth. That's coming to PS4 October 20th. Thank you, gentlemen. I think you've done it again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
PlayStation